that I really did want to be involved in implementing those ideas. But I also felt that it would be very, very difficult to do unless you had the right team. So I came up with the idea of creating slates and running on slates. I also always felt from the very beginning that it would be very difficult to ensure in the mechanism that was created. And that mechanism, kind of think of it, was a steering committee. And the steering committee would consist of 4 people. It would consist of a black co-chair, a white co-chair, a secretary, and a treasurer, who could be of either race, but not of, or of any race, but not of the same race.
Mm-hmm.
And
as each other.
As each other. So that there had to be at least two members of that 4-man steering committee who were not white.
Right.
There had to be at least 2 members of that 4-man steering committee.
Or another way to look at it,
white.
not more than 2 of the same race.
No, actually, it seems to me, no, I guess you're right. I guess maybe so. That it couldn't be 2, it couldn't be 2 of...
You couldn't have 3 of the same race.
Couldn't have 3 of the same race, yes. You could have an Asian and a black, an Asian and a white, or what have you, but you couldn't have any with 2 of the same race, right? Mm-hmm. Thanks for directing my memory. But they also had to represent geographical diversity within the National Association, which sort of roughly fell into 4 quadrants, or was arbitrarily drawn into 4 quadrants. And that was very important to us. Who got left out of this equation by and large was the independent, who was not a member of a local organization and therefore had no way of direct input or involvement in the International Association. Later we sort of came up with this idea of having individual memberships, and people could individually join, and people did occasionally. Mm-hmm. But at the time...
But at that point, if someone who lived in North Dakota, say, wanted to be part of the National, they couldn't?
They could.
They had to join their closest local chapter?
They had, yeah, or they were... No, they didn't have to. They could join independently and pay an independent membership fee, and they were considered for regional purposes to belong to whichever quadrant they geographically happened to reside in. Mm-hmm. And they could run for office on that basis. Mm-hmm. But the point was that the communication was largely by newsletter from organization to organization, and for all intents and purposes, really, the International Association was conceived of as the organ for chapters. It was not really designed to address the needs of the independent member. And I don't think that was deliberate on our part so much as it was that we were very concerned with our own organizations and their viability and their needs and their agendas, and protecting the agendas of our local organizations from the agenda of some other organization. And we weren't really worried about individuals. Luckily, in retrospect, those individuals had Mike Smith in his quarterly, which served really, as it had before, continued to serve as an excellent organ of communication about black and white men together, organizationally, locally, nationally, internationally, and about the concept of black and white men together, which was really central to many individuals across the country who had no other connection with that concept or that interaction than a desire to read about it or to be involved with it, and the quarterly, and that was all they had. And we really didn't do very much about that. We really sort of abandoned those people at that time. It just was more on our plate than we could handle. And frankly, it wasn't our charge. I was sent there to represent BWTLA. I wasn't sent there to represent potential BWT members who were unaffiliated, the unaffiliates we call them. They were the stepchildren. And perhaps they still are. But that was the way that we did it. So regionally, I did not see from the very beginning, and it was almost a make or break issue for me, this regional distribution thing, how you could do that and also ensure quality in your officers and ensure racial parity. I just thought it was too much. We were just being too politically correct and too demanding, and it was just in an organization I felt was going to have enough of a struggle trying to survive and to get resources from its local organizations and independently. I just felt it was just too much. So I came up with the idea of running on a slate because I wanted to be involved, but I was very concerned with who I would have to work with. And remember, there was no budget and there was no travel money allocated, so that whatever you did with your fellow officers had to be done by phone.
Nickel.
And largely, I mean, in theory, you were supposed to get your expenses reimbursed, but nobody knew where that was going to come from yet.
Mm-hmm.
And we were dependent upon the local organizations to contribute, and at this point, they hadn't pledged any contributions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I felt that it was imperative that we be able to work together. And I sat down and figured out, who do I think I can work with, and who do I want to work with on this? And I picked up my phone and I called him. After Warren Timoney, he picked up his phone and called me and said, get me to the IA. I thought about it and I picked up the phone and I called Henry Weemhoff, a co-founder of the New York organization, and I called Jerry Mallon of the Philadelphia organization, and I called Chip, his name was Chip, and he was a member of the Denver organization, and he'd come to the first BWMT convention along with Tim Wilson. Mm-hmm. They were the representatives together, the black and white representatives. Henry Weemhoff was white, I was black, Jerry Mallon was white, and Chip was black.
Mm-hmm. So in the beginning, the first election, which was in 82.
It was held in December or January, I think. It was held in January of 82.
And it was to elect 4 officers.
It was to elect 4 officers and an editorial board of 4 members of regional and racial distribution.
So the concept of a board of directors had not yet emerged.
No.
I see.
There was no intervening body between the steering committee of 4 officers and the individual organization. Each organization was asked to designate 2 members of different races to be the coordinators and communicators with the National Association, and they were to be then sort of appointed by the association to ratify the charter. But there was at that time no explicit plan for them to sort of act as an ongoing board of directors with periodic meetings other than the annual convention. No, we didn't have the resources or the largeness to think about it in those terms at that point.
Sure, it was too new.
Right.
And who was able to vote at the election in 82 for the 4 officers?
That was to be determined by dues. Each organization to affiliate had to pay dues, and the dues were...
Chapter dues?
Yes.
So each chapter would pay dues to the national.
To the national, which would give us some operating funds, and there was a structure broken down based upon membership, and I think it was anything from 10 under, and you paid X amount, and 10 to 20 or 30 or 50 or whatever it was, and you paid Y amount, and 50 over or 100 over, can't remember now, and you paid a still higher amount.
Right, which is the way it is today, and that also it gives you more of a vote, more clout in the election. So
yes,
it was that way then,
right?
Too.
And some organizations voted money and sent it to us immediately, and others didn't. Some never did. Some voted to pay for less than their actual membership, and some would get into the habit of withholding their money because they were dissatisfied with what we were doing. So that all began early on. In any event, that was the way it was done.
So at this election in 82, which was really the first election of the organization, there were 4 candidates.
Yes.
Was there competition?
Yes, there was. There was the slate that I put together with Henry Weemhoff and I running as co-chairs. Neither of the 2 people that we wanted to run as the other 2 members, the treasurer and the secretary, were able to do so. They each Jerry decided that he had to focus his attention on the survival of the Philadelphia chapter. And Chip simply decided that the demands of his job were too great for him to perform the functions of a treasurer. And and I had done something which would later be construed as very, very bold and rude and possibly unethical. It
Oh, I
was
can't imagine that.
it was not clear whether from the initial structure that we created, whether or not you could serve as an officer of the International Association, the IA, unless you were a representative to the IA of your local group.
And how was that defined?
The local groups could select their own representatives, and then those representatives became this larger sort of board that voted money and so forth, but never actually met. And Chip, although he had represented great men of the Rockies at the convention in San Francisco, in fact, had ceased being the representative of his organization to the International Association after that. And they had designated somebody else, another black man. And I didn't know who that was, but when I found that out, and I wanted Chip to run on our slate, I thought Chip would be really good, and I wanted him to run on our slate, and I was told, well, I can't do that, or he can't do that because somebody else represents us. And I said, well, I don't see where that clearly is stated in our charter, but other folks, and Mike Smith said that it was, and so forth. And so I said, fine. So I said, give me the phone number of whoever the new guy is. And I called him up and I asked him would he step aside. And he said he would if Chip ran. And boy, was I beat up on later for that. That was seen as gross manipulation. And I suppose it was. I wanted the International Association, I wanted the IA to work, and I thought that it was going to have enormous difficulty doing that. I wanted to participate in it, and I felt that in order to do that efficiently and effectively, I needed to be able to work with people whom I trusted to be able would deliver when they said that they would do something, who I felt were competent, and whom I felt were committed to the International Association. And so I felt that the best way to do that was to create a slate. Well, slates had never been envisioned at the first convention. So a number of people, a number of organizations even, condemned the concept and said that this was manipulation, this was replicating traditional power grabbing from the an America gone wrong politically and so forth. But I persisted that I thought this was the best way to work. Henry encountered a great deal of opposition and resistance in the New York organization, and others did run, and they ran individually. And we were the only slate that ran, and but others did run individually. I no longer remember all of who they were, but others did run. So that there was a choice. And but our slate, which did not include Chip or Jerry, it included Jim Searcy of San Diego, who was black, and it included Bob Atchison, I think his name was, from Washington D.C., who was white, and I had met Jim Searcy, but I had not met Bob. But we didn't heard from other items, heard from other people that they were good people and so forth. As it turned out, Bob would resign almost immediately because he was unable to discharge the duties of the treasurer, and so it ended up being sort of a three-man steering committee.
So the concept of the slate means that it's either all or none.
Well, or no, because actually voters didn't have to vote for the slate, but we announced to everyone that we were running as a slate, so that voters knew that we had agreed that we wanted to work together and would work together, and we asked and recommended that voters vote for us, for the four of us, to implement right. The editorial board members, of whom there were also four, were elected independently of one another. So that's kind of how that went.
And so what happened? The four of you won?
The four of us won. And Henry Weehoff and I became, in January of 1982, the first co-chairs of the International Association of Black and White Men Together. And we promptly began a back and forth process of trying to figure out what to do. And the four guys who were elected as the editorial board began trying to pull together a national newsletter that would be...
That's what they would be editing.
Right. But they were to be elected independently. They were not subject to the steering committee except budgetarily. And that was the original structure.
Great.
So that's how I came to be co-chair of the first black co-chair of the International Association.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Together,
Maybe this is time to take a little break.
We're back on camera.
Yes, again, this is Paul Cloutier. Welcome, everyone. We're here interviewing Charles Stewart for the History and Legacy Project of the National Association of Black and White Men Together. And Charles, this is kind of the second part of our talking about your history with the organization. And we left off at the 1982 convention of the, at the time called International Association of Black and White Men Together in Washington, D.C., correct?
Correct.
In the summer of '82. And it was at that convention that you began your career as one of the co-chairs of the organization. So you've just been elected. How do you feel?
I remember being elated upon election and then began the hard work. Henry Weemhoff and I, between election in January of '82 and actually presiding at the convention, the first convention of the International Association as such in Washington, D.C. in 1982. There was a lot of work. There was the editorial board put out the first newsletter of the organization, and Henry and I each sort of made opening statements addressing the membership of the International Association at that point. In addition, we began to try to decide where we would allocate our very, very scarce resources. Most chapters have not yet released views, although we had made it clear that organizations would not be able to vote at the convention in '82 if they had not paid up their dues. Nonetheless, at that point, they had most of the year they hadn't, and so we were communicating sort of on our own dime. And
so at the time, the sole source of funding for the organization were chapter dues.
yes, and since most of those were there were only 10 chapters, most of them hadn't paid. Most of those funds we allocated to the editorial board because they had a real publication that they had to get out. And the editor, the first elected editor that year, was a real believer in process, so that virtually not a comma could be changed unless all 4 of the editorial board members and the author of the article agreed. And that could be a very time-consuming and expensive process. But it was very democratic, and we made it clear from the very first convention that we wanted every step of the way to be entirely inclusive and democratic.
Which is also difficult because probably the members of the board lived in all different places in the country, is that correct?
Not only did they, but it was required that we live in different areas of the country, so that no 2 board members could come from the same section of the country. And the country was divided into 4 quadrants, and so we spent a lot of money, but most of it was on our own.
And was the racial parity of the 4 members of the board, editorial board, the same? Yeah.
Yes, it was. I don't remember now who all the members were. Like Dell Jackson was one of them, and there were 3 other members. And I had said that Bob Atchison was eventually became our treasurer, but in fact, during that period, it was Bob Rucker from Washington, D.C., who was our treasurer. And he had been treasurer for the local.
And was there something to treasure?
Not much, but such as there was. And also remember, a significant portion of incoming contributing monies were directed to the Washington, D.C. chapter in order to provide monies for them to host the convention, which was the only tangible product that we were able to offer. And technically, it was a hosted event by Washington, D.C. and the East Coast Network. We haven't really talked about BWT networks, but those had spontaneously developed prior to the creation of the International Association, and they had begun functioning already. And what began to be a pattern sometimes was chapters which didn't feel that they could independently host an event or a major event or host an annual convention would do so in conjunction with other chapters in proximity, in geographical proximity. And we call that a network. And we consciously urged and supported the creation of those networks, and they would raise money and spend money and hold events and so forth. But the two organizations or groups that could produce a real product, the editorial board and the BWT Washington D.C. chapter, were the ones that got the funds. And so the rest of us were kind of on our own. And we were initially just generating a memorandum back and forth with one another, sort of articulating what we were going to do and what we were going to be. And then we began to turn those into articles for the newsletter. We were interviewed by Mike Smith for the BWT Quarterly, which again got the message out to people who were unaffiliated with any of the chapters. And we went into the June 1982 convention, I think, feeling that we had done a fair amount of the basic work of creating the structure of a national organization, given that we were all working full-time and didn't have any money to do that. Well, we got to Washington, D.C. and found that many of our confrères in BWT did not agree that we had done enough or the right things or put enough emphasis. The fact of the matter was, I think that only one newsletter had actually come out by June. Now remember, we were 1 year later from the very first convention at which there had been an enormous amount of enthusiasm generated about the fact that we were going to create a national and international association. And that enthusiasm partially reflected the fact that Mike Smith had done the quarterly and had organized and conducted the first convention single-handedly out of his own pocket with really only a few months advanced planning and preparation. And so the expectations of the steering committee and of the editorial board were based upon or derived from what had been achieved the previous year. We're now a year later. Well, remember, the first 6 months were blown by the fact that the group that was supposed to conduct elections and charter votes and whatnot had not done so. And so in fact, elected officers should have been in place by August of 1981, when in fact Henry Weemhoff and I took office in January of 82. And then we had until June to prepare, and the editorial board had until then to generate newsletters. Bottom line is we walked into Washington, D.C. and got our heads chopped off because we had not done enough to get the organization going and moving. And some of what we had done, people didn't approve of. And we tried to explain that the difference when you create an organization which is committed to incredibly inclusive process and yet doesn't have resources, monies to spend, that the ability to get anything done is a direct function of the degree to which somebody simply says, I'm going to do it, whether it is democratic, whether it is inclusive or not. By and large, that explanation didn't fly. It mainly didn't fly in 1982 in Washington, D.C. with members of the New York chapter. And that is because the New York chapter was unique in the International Association in that it had an entirely inclusive structure locally with no officers per se, and yet had been enormously productive in coalition building, in structural process, in outreach, in membership drives, and in producing dynamite social functions and networking with other chapters.
Yeah. That's pretty much still the case today. for the New
Okay,
York.
is it? Well, that was certainly the case then. And so they were, understandably, given what they were able to achieve at the local level,
They couldn't understand why you...
exactly. And so we were, and despite the fact that Henry Weemhoff, who was a member of their own organization, who was the co-founder of the New York chapter, was the co-chair now of the International Association. And he had taken some flack, as I mentioned earlier, about the fact that he had agreed to run on a slate for that position. And I found out later that a substantial number of members also felt that he, who had sort of been the spiritual energy behind the New York chapter's founding, when he shifted that emphasis to the International Association, many of them told me later that they felt frankly abandoned and were angry and resented the allocation of that resource, Henry Weemhoff, to New York. Contrast that, of course, with the fact that BWGLA was delighted to kick me upstairs to the International Association. So it was kind of an interesting phenomenon in that sense. And I was going through a personal crisis at that point. The one and only man I had met in Black and White Men Together, Los Angeles, and I had broken up just weeks before the 1982 convention in Washington, D.C., and I was a walking zombie. I don't really even remember most of that convention as a result. So Henry stepped in and ran the show. I mean, I was physically there. I've seen photos, so I know I was, but I don't even remember any of it. I wasn't there in any real sense. And he ran it and took most of the heat that was directed at us from the New York chapter, from individuals, from unaffiliated members, from Mike Smith. He took a lot of that heat. And
So in spite of all that heat going into the D.C. convention, you were able to go out of it as the co-chairs.
Yes, we were affirmed as co-chairs and sent out with new mandates and new instructions, and made certain agreements as to what we would do and how we would conduct ourselves thereafter, as did members of the editorial board. And once again, as soon as the 82 convention was over, that energy dissipated. By the way, that was a wonderful convention in other ways. And I remember some of the outstanding speeches. Adrian Rich spoke, and Steve Indy, who was at that time the executive director of the Gay Rights National Lobby, and whose lover was black, with whom I stayed during that period. And there were a number of other speakers of national renown who spoke at that convention. As I said, I just sort of vaguely remember some of them. But some were people I had heard about and read about. And in some sense, I have to say that BWT began to come into its own and began to be perceived as a national organization. And that convention consolidated the local chapter, BWT Washington, D.C., as a player in the social and political scene in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the chapters would find as the years went by that hosting a convention was enormously draining. It created enormous infighting. And yet it kind of brought everybody together after all was said and done, and left a chapter which had developed skills and connections that it hadn't had and might not have acquired for years.